I talked myself out of a job last week.
What do you mean?
Final round interview, I'd crushed every previous stage. The hiring manager loved me. And then in the last meeting with the CEO, I just kept going. She asked me a simple question about my leadership philosophy. I gave her a 2-minute answer, then I clarified the 2-minute answer, then I added a caveat, then I gave an example, then another example. Somewhere around minute 7, I watched her eyes glaze over, and I knew right there in the chair that I had lost it.
What was the question?
What kind of leader are you? That's it, 5 words, and I turned it into a TED Talk nobody asked for.
What should you have said?
I don't know, something shorter, something that made her lean in instead of lean back.
That's the whole thing right there. The difference between someone leaning in and leaning back is almost never about what you said. It's about how much you said. The moment you over-explain, you shift the power. You go from someone who's being evaluated to someone who's auditioning, and people can feel that shift even if they can't name it.
But I had good things to say. That's what kills me. The content was strong.
I believe you. But content isn't the problem. Volume is the problem. When you say too much, you don't add to your message, you dilute it. Every additional sentence takes a little weight off the ones that came before. The first thing you said probably landed. The second thing reinforced it. Everything after that was erosion.
Erosion. That's a good word for it, because it felt like that, like I was slowly washing away my own credibility while I was sitting there.
And here's what makes it worse. When you talk too much, people don't just lose interest. They start to wonder why you're still talking, and the answer they come up with is never flattering. They think you're nervous, or you're compensating for something, or you don't actually know your point, so you're circling around it hoping to land on one.
None of those things were true.
Doesn't matter. Perception was already forming while your mouth was still moving. That's the thing about silence most people don't understand. Silence, after a strong statement, doesn't create a vacuum. It creates gravity. It pulls people toward what you just said. It gives your words room to breathe and land. But the second you rush to fill that silence, you're telling the room you don't trust your own words to stand alone.
I think I do that. Fill silence. It physically bothers me. When I say something and there's a pause, I feel like I need to keep going or the other person will think I'm done, or worse, that I don't have more.
And that instinct, that need to fill the gap, it's one of the most expensive habits a person can have. In negotiations, in interviews, in leadership, in relationships. Silence is where other people do their thinking. When you keep talking, you're not just taking up space, you're robbing the other person of the chance to process what you've said. You're making the conversation about your comfort instead of their understanding.
Okay, but let me push back. Some situations require explanation. If I'm presenting a strategy to my team, I can't just say 3 words and sit down. That's not leadership, that's a fortune cookie.
You're right, and this isn't about being cryptic or withholding useful information. It's about the ratio of signal to noise. Think about the best communicators you've ever been around, the ones who made you feel like every word mattered. Were they the ones who talked the most?
No, usually the opposite.
Usually the opposite. Because when someone speaks rarely and briefly, every word carries weight. The room adjusts. People lean in, literally, physically lean in, because they've learned that when this person opens their mouth, it counts. But when someone talks constantly, the room adjusts to that too. People start half listening. They nod while checking their phone, because they've learned that most of what's coming is filler.
I know people like that, both kinds. And you're right, the quiet ones command more attention. But I always assumed that was personality. Some people are just naturally reserved.
Some are, but the best ones aren't naturally anything. They've trained themselves. They've learned that the urge to say more is almost always about them, their anxiety, their ego, their need to be seen as smart, and almost never about the audience. The audience wanted the point. They got the point in sentence 2. Everything after that was for the speaker, not the listener.
That's a rough thing to hear.
It's a useful thing to hear. Think about what happens when a judge speaks in a courtroom. 3 sentences and the room is silent. Not because the judge is brilliant, some aren't, but because the structure of the role demands economy. The judge doesn't explain, doesn't justify, doesn't add color. They rule. And that economy of language is what makes the words feel powerful. Now imagine if the judge started rambling, started giving context and caveats and personal anecdotes. The authority evaporates.
All right, give me a real example. Someone in history who understood this.
Louis XIV of France, the Sun King. He ruled for over 70 years, and one of his most effective tools wasn't an army or a treasury. It was brevity. When courtiers came to him with elaborate petitions, long, flowing arguments crafted by the finest minds in France, Louis would listen, completely silent, and then he'd respond with one of a handful of phrases. I shall see. We will consider. Sometimes just a look. No elaborations, no explanations. The courtiers would leave the room and spend days analyzing what he meant. Did I shall see mean yes? Was the pause before he spoke significant? Was his expression pleased or displeased?
So they were doing all the work for him.
Exactly. His silence made them fill in the blanks, and the blanks they filled were always more powerful than anything he could have said, because whatever they imagined was shaped by their own hopes and fears. A long speech from the king could be picked apart, argued with, quoted back, but a short phrase, it was a mirror. Each person saw in it whatever they were most afraid of or most desperate for.
That's actually genius. He turned less into more by making other people's imaginations do the heavy lifting.
And it kept everyone off balance. When you never say more than necessary, people can't predict you. You can't build a case against you because you haven't given them material. You can't quote you out of context because there's barely any context to extract. You become harder to attack, harder to pin down, and paradoxically, more respected, because restraint reads as confidence. The person who feels the need to explain everything is signaling doubt. The person who says their piece and stops is signaling certainty.
But here's where I struggle with this. In real life, in my actual life, being the quiet person in the room sometimes means getting overlooked. I've been in meetings where the loud people got the credit, where staying quiet meant people assumed I didn't have an opinion.
There's a critical difference between saying less and saying nothing. Saying nothing is abdication. You disappear. People forget you were there. Saying less means when you do speak, it cuts through. The problem isn't quietness, it's timing. When you sit through an entire meeting silent and then offer one thought at the very end, people process it differently than if you'd been chattering the whole time and happened to say something smart in the middle. The quiet person's single comment gets replayed, gets discussed after the meeting, becomes, "Did you hear what she said?" The talkative person's smart comment gets buried under everything else they said.
So it's not about being silent, it's about being selective.
Selective, precise, intentional. Every time you open your mouth, you're making a trade. You're exchanging silence, which has value, for words. And the question is, are these words worth more than the silence they're replacing? Most of the time, honestly, they're not.
That's a hard discipline, though, especially when you're passionate about something. When you know you're right, the instinct is to keep going, keep adding evidence, keep building the case until it's airtight.
And the irony is that the more evidence you stack, the weaker the case feels, because now you look like you're trying to convince yourself, not the other person. Think about arguments in relationships. When someone's lying or uncertain, what do? They over-explain. They give too many details. They build a tower of justification that actually signals the opposite of confidence. And everyone instinctively knows this. When someone gives you a simple, clean answer, you tend to believe them. When they give you a paragraph, you start looking for the lie.
My ex used to say that. When you start explaining, I stop believing.
Smart person.
Yeah, smart enough to leave.
There's a version of this that shows up in leadership too. The managers and executives who talk the least in meetings, not the ones who are checked out, but the ones who are clearly listening and choose their moments, those people shape the direction of conversations without dominating them. Because when they finally speak, the room pivots. Everyone adjusts to what they said. And that's a form of power that no amount of talking can buy.
What about the people who use silence as a weapon, though? The passive-aggressive ones, the boss who just stares at you after you present an idea and doesn't say anything. That's not powerful, that's hostile.
You're right, and there's an important distinction. Strategic brevity is about control of yourself. It's an internal discipline. What you're describing, the cold stare, the passive-aggressive silence, that's about controlling someone else through discomfort. One is restraint, the other is cruelty wearing restraint's clothes. People can feel the difference. When someone speaks briefly because they're confident and focused, the room feels calm. When someone withholds words to make you squirm, the room feels tense. Same behavior, completely different energy.
How do you know which one you're doing?
Intention. If you're saying less because you've made your point and you trust it to land, that's discipline. If you're saying less because you want the other person to feel uncertain or small, that's manipulation. And over time, people absolutely figure out which one you are.
Okay, so let me see if I've got this. It's not about being mysterious. It's not about being cold. It's about having enough confidence in what you say that you don't need to prop it up with more words.
And understanding that every word after the point is a withdrawal from your credibility account. A small one each time, but they add up. The people who have the most influence in any room, the ones people genuinely listen to, genuinely respect, they spend their words like they're spending money, carefully, deliberately, and never more than the moment requires.
I keep thinking about that interview. If I'd answered her question in 2 sentences and then just sat there, comfortable, looked her in the eye, let the silence do its thing,
What do you think would have happened?
she would have leaned in. She would have asked a follow-up, and then I'd be answering her question instead of guessing at it. The conversation would have been a conversation instead of a monologue.
And she would have left that room thinking about what you said instead of how much you said.
You know what's funny? Right now, this silence, I want to fill it. I can feel the pull. I want to add something, wrap it up, make a smart comment. But I think the smarter thing is to just... Yeah, I think I'm done.